Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. The College of Policing hosts this episode, which is all about professionalising neighbourhood policing. The panel talk about making sure those who are working in these areas of policing have the knowledge, the skills and confidence they need to do the job effectively and are recognised as the specialists they are.
The first thing I'd like to do is ask each of our speakers to if you could just introduce yourselves, who you are, your job role. That would start us off. Do you want to go first?
Good morning. My name's Joy Taylor. I'm the Policing Standards Manager for Investigation and Forensics at the College of Policing, and I'm responsible for investigative skills training across policing.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jamie Daniels. I'm the Crime and Criminal Justice Lead for the College of Policing. I'm a seconded police officer, a trained SIO, and I've been doing the role for just under 2 years, and Joe and I work together, and I'll hand over.
Morning, everyone. My name's Nicola MacGregor. I am the Senior Policy Advisor for Frontline Policing at the college. I'm also a seconded police officer, seconded from Northumbria, and I started my secondment with the college in January.
So I'm going to start off by asking you a little bit about the challenges around neighbourhood policing and how that might have changed. So I don't know who wants to take that first, but give us that little bit of backdrop, really.
I think operationally, which is my background for the last 15 years in neighbourhood, it's been seen, I think, as neighbourhood policing as a nice to have, and it never used to be like that. And the college's aim is to get it back to what it should be, which is a specialism that requires really dedicated, passionate, committed police officers, PCSOs, sergeants, inspectors, who will go out into their community and be seen, be visible, have conversations. And I think we've got to this point for a number of reasons. You only have to look at the state of policing reports that have been done over the last 4 or 5 years, and certainly the one that was produced a couple of weeks ago that is absolutely demanding that neighbourhood policing is put back front and centre. The neighbourhood policing guarantee that the current government have brought in, that has 5 clear pillars that are all centred around neighbourhood policing. And then you've got austerity, the fall in numbers, when demand increased, when COVID hit, officers in roles such as neighbourhood had to remain as skilled and professional as they could be in other areas of policing, such as dealing with protests, dealing with public order incidents, responding to the public as response police officers. And I think that's kind of created almost a perfect storm insofar as you've got left a nucleus of staff. Our front line are the youngest I think they've ever been, and I count neighbourhood in that front line and include our contact management staff within that as well. And we owe it to them to make them as professional, as skilled and as relevant as we possibly can, but above all, to give them time to get out into the community. And that's why the college has brought in what we're going to be discussing very shortly.
Okay. So just on that point then, again, as somebody who's not in this world, historically, was neighbourhood policing seen as something you just learn on the job, or did police services train staff to deal as a specialism? Was it treated as a specialism?
Certainly not in the last 15 years that I've done neighbourhood policing. Nobody ever gave me a course on how to be a good neighbourhood officer, how to be a good neighbourhood sergeant, or how to be a good neighbourhood inspector. And I think what you relied on is a lot of what we rely on in policing, which is goodwill and really good people. So you would start your first day on a neighbourhood team and hope for the best, which isn't fair on anybody. It's not fair on someone new to the role who wants to do a great job. It's not fair on those that are experienced having to impart their experience on a new officer or a new PCSO if they're not trained to do that, if they're not a trainer, a tutor, a teacher, a mentor, but they're just really good at their job. That's another facet to add to them. And I think as a result, we've got a lot of people in neighbourhood who are really, really passionate, but haven't ever really been shown the right way or the correct way or an evidence-based way to tackle community issues and community policing.
Okay. And also, just because there might be people who don't understand the role of the College of Policing as well. So what role does obviously the police services will train their staff, but what role does the college then have at a national level in this, not just with neighbourhood policing, but more generally, would you say?
Do you want to say that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the college, I was just going to add, actually, I think what the professionalising of the neighbourhood policing programme does, actually, is it starts to provide a very strong evidence base to many of the things that good bobbying, for want of a better expression, has been historically seen to be. So knowing your community, knowing where your problems are, knowing your vulnerable people, knowing the people who may be causing the greatest level of harm. And what the professionalising of neighbourhood has done is effectively develop that up into a professional standing for the very first time. So in many ways, it's very exciting in terms of how it's advanced that. And I think the College of Policing, as the national body for policing, has that role to uphold those standards, to advance those standards across 43 plus forces. And as the national body there, what we're able to do is to also see where the best practice is, and also lift and shift that to make sure that it's not a postcode lottery. It's a challenging role that the college has, but it's certainly a vital one.
And presumably then from a standards perspective, having worked in the fire service on standards myself, that is also an evolving role, isn't it? Because you don't write a standard and it's fixed in stone forever. The world around you changes. So do you want to talk a little bit about that aspect of developing standards?
Developing standards is really a challenge, as you say. It is an evolving picture. We are constantly looking for the evidence base to support the best available practice for our practitioners at the front line. So standards will change over time. They will reflect the evidence, the politics, the communities that we serve, the practitioners that are doing that role. And we will consult quite broadly and quite widely to make sure that what we are doing is fit for purpose. It removes the duplication between the different programs.
Right.
And one of the challenges with the neighbourhood policing programme and with My World is making sure that those two mesh together.
Yes.
And don't duplicate, don't overlap, but work as a cohesive whole.
Yeah.
And that's a constantly evolving picture.
Absolutely, because it's important to get the standard right, but it also has to be implementable, if that's even a word, doesn't it, on the front line, not difficult for those officers to actually interpret, understand and be able to enact it, basically.
And what we're teaching are vocational skills. Whilst there is an academic evidence base that underpins it, and there are theoretical, there's law, there's legislation, there's procedure, it is really about vocational skills and how you apply that in the workplace. And how you assess people as being competent to work in that environment. And that is a constantly evolving thing. And we expect our practitioners to do continuing professional development to maintain those skills.
Okay. And just going back to what you started with there around the importance of neighbourhood policing and the need for it and whatever, presumably as well as it being now recognised as something that needs training and support and the standards, the society has changed as well over those 15 years.
Absolutely.
So the demands on neighbourhood policing, would you say they are different now or are they changing?
I think the public has an absolute right to expect a really high standard of service from their neighbourhood policing. And I think the public has an absolute right to be able to say, I know who my local police officer is.
Right.
And that's one of the things that's been put into the neighbourhood policing guarantee from the government around you need to be more visible than you are. However, society has changed, so visibility to one person can mean something different to somebody else. For example, my grandma, she's 94. To be visible to my grandma, she'd need to see you walk down the street. But if we look at the different generations and different age groups, visibility includes being available online, being visible at a time to suit people in a way that suits them, depending on their circumstances, their needs and their abilities, and the urgency of the contact and support that they need from the police. So it has hugely changed, and we really need to keep up with that.
Okay.
It's worth noting that effectively demand has changed in two ways. You have the traditional demands that have been there all the way through the 20th century. So the same types of crimes are occurring, or the same types of vulnerable situations. So a common assault, an assault, a burglary, a robbery. The challenge is that those crimes are now being complicated by society's development in the information, the digital arena, the filming, the recording, the online.
Right.
So you have that complication that makes it more challenging for a new frontline officer. So, you know, and you can turn the clock back through different pieces of legislation and they are still very relevant today. Just when I joined the policing some 23 years ago. And then you have new crimes that aren't just that are based in the new digital world, the online world, online harm.
Yeah.
So you've got that, that's been affected by this, and you've got this as a new concept.
Yeah.
And this part is making this part more complicated.
Yes.
So a good example would be a really good beat officer knowing the neighbourhood areas, what he's basically patrolling. He's sat outside of a pub thinking, could be some trouble tonight. He gets in there, but there's an assault that takes place. Or she gets in there as an assault that takes place.
Yeah.
Fast forward. That assault's been recorded 15 times.
Yeah. Lots of
Different
mobiles.
footage.
Yeah.
It's gone uploaded.
Yeah.
Someone's already said something offensive about someone else. And that one incident has
Yes.
also generated several different calls into the police. That is a basic example of how a traditional area of neighbourhood policing can be complicated by the new area, which is why you have to professionalise. You have to
Okay.
make risk-based decisions in order to tackle that and get to the heart of that problem
Yeah.
straight away. So that is effectively what the college is there to do, to examine the landscape, to
Yeah.
understand where society is, and to adapt.
And factor that into what you're doing.
That's right.
Okay, so let's move forward then to this programme that you want to talk about that the college has now got. Do you want to start by talking about that? I'm not quite sure. Yeah?
So the neighbourhood policing programme, NPP, you might see it being called when there's news articles and information goes out to the public. It's designed to go right back to the start. And it's been designed with practitioners, not for practitioners and not for neighbourhood officers. They were consulted all the way along the process. And the process began the summer of last year, where we reached out to police forces and said to neighbourhood staff, new in role, very experienced, ready to leave the organisation on retirement after such a long time, and said, if somebody had said to you on day one in neighbourhood, this is what you need to know, what would it have been? And if you could tell yourself on your first day what you know now, what would that be? And as a result, we built a pilot product, which was piloted by 11 police forces up and down the country, as far south as Devon and Cornwall, as far north up as Northumbria. And we trialled that with them and then asked for their feedback and said, did we land it right? Is the evidence base at the right level? And is it challenging enough? And as a result, we've tweaked and changed and issued evaluation papers. And what we've got is we've got a 4-tiered programme for anybody who joins neighbourhood, from PCSO, Special Constable, Police Constable, right up to your senior managers, who may, during their career, if they've taken the detective pathway or they've been in the operations departments, have never worked in community policing, but really need to understand what those boots on the ground need to do and can do to keep demand managed and to raise trust and confidence in the police. So that programme starts with e-learning, and it's delivered in really small bite-sized pieces, and it covers 6 topics. Community engagement, which is how do you talk to the community and how do you understand what's happened before you arrived and how that's impacted on community, the trauma they have felt, the relationship they previously had with the police, how they like to see the police in uniform or plain clothes. Is it a football club or in a really formal setting like this where people can ask questions in an audience? And how do you understand that your communication style and your ability to win those relationships round and maintain them, even when the police get things wrong, how do you do that? The second module looks at problem solving, and that's based on the international SARA model, which is recognised in every country and every form of policing around the world. It originates from the United States, and it follows a really set system to solve problems. Small problems, there's a dark alleyway that keeps attracting some young people and there's a bit of youth disorder. How do we problem solve that? Right up to how do we solve the issue of e-bikes and e-scooters that go flying around our estates and our streets at home. Not easy, but it's the same system of doing that. Third module is around antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour is as impactful on victims as a crime, and it should be treated with the same level of input, investigation, and working on it using your problem-solving skills. Module 4 is around tackling serious and organised crimes in our communities. I would bet there is not one single community, area, village, street, town, city that does not have an element of organised crime within it, and it's about skilling our police officers whether they are rural police officers with a vast geography down to really inner city police officers that might only have a street to look after. Module following on from that is partnerships and prevention, because absolutely the police are not the only partner agency and are quite often not the right agency to solve an issue or to lead somebody to help or to support an offender through change. And it's giving those police officers the skills to know, who are my partners? What legislation do I have in my back pocket to support me, making sure they sit around the table with me to help? And the final module, module 6, is around offender management. And it's supporting people in the community to try to rehabilitate, because actually going back to prison isn't always the answer. But conversely, through offender management, you reduce crime, you make your community feel safer, there's less victims of crime because crime should decrease, and where you can, you use controls, powers and tactics to manage those offenders in the community. So the NPP, the Neighbourhood Policing Programme, starts with e-learning. It's about an hour on each topic, and it's just to give you that really basic foundation knowledge to come into the classroom, and then you're taught each of the 6 modules in the classroom. The modules range between a day or 2 days, and collectively it's 2 working weeks, 10 days of teaching. When that teaching is finished, the officers, staff, volunteers, because it is applicable to special constables, have a year to a year and a half to complete a portfolio of evidence to show that the learning they've been given to get that standard national, to get everybody skilled to the same level with lots of local context, because everything is different between those 43 forces, and they then come back into the office, into the police station, and record what they've done to show that that new skill, that new knowledge, that new ability has been applied out in the community, and reflect on how successful that was. We've then designed a package to be delivered to sergeants and inspectors. They're those frontline leaders. They need to understand the powers and tactics their staff have got, but at a strategic level to understand how you get that team performing. And the final level of training to that is for your senior managers, your chief inspectors, your superintendents, your chief superintendents. Again, it may be an anomaly that they've never worked in community policing, depending on their career pathway to get up to that rank. And it's about getting them to understand, if you make a decision to move a resource from one area to another, or you make a decision to cancel a community event, or deploy a lot of officers in an area in response to something that's happening, how does that impact on your community tension? And what should we be saying to the community to reassure them that we're doing what we think is the right thing and at the right time? And that collectively gives all of our police officers, our sergeants, our inspectors, our PCSOs the same national standard of training, and it's recognition that it really is a skill to manage a community and all of the threat, the harm, the risk and the tension that can come from having that position within the police.
Fantastic. That's an amazing summary of a lot of work for you to pull that together. So where are police forces up to with that? Has it just been launched? What's the sort of timeline for this?
So the pilot was conducted last year, and that finished just after Christmas. We collected our thoughts, redrafted the programme, tested it again and put it back out. On the 24th of June, we launched the e-learning for all police officers across England and Wales, so all 43 forces. And then on the 5th of September, so just last week, we launched the classroom materials, which are written in a way to make sure that it's delivered to a national standard right across the country. And over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we are taking that on the road. There's 4 sessions where all of the representatives from all of the police forces will come, and we will explain to them why the standards are so high, why there's some really tricky questions and some really tricky tasks in that training.
Yeah.
And that will roll on. And we're hopeful, as a result of some support from the government and the grant that they've given us, that everybody should be through that training by this time next year.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the Emergency Services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
So it was obviously a government priority to get some support, and a priority then also perhaps for National Police Chiefs Council alongside the College of Policing. Is there a level of national support for this that is prioritising it?
I think that's an understatement, actually. I think
Okay.
they've got huge support from chiefs up and down the country.
Yeah.
Our own CEO, Sir Andy Marsh, has put his full shoulder behind this programme of work, because
Right.
police chiefs recognise how vital neighbourhood policing is to delivery of an effective policing service.
Yeah.
So why would they not?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, did you want to add anything there around from your perspective around the standards on this?
I mean, one of the biggest things about investigating crime is you need policing by consent, and you need the active involvement of your communities.
Yeah.
If you build your communities and your community engagement effectively, it makes the investigation that much easier.
Yeah.
But equally, the guys that are doing the neighbourhood policing are also themselves investigators.
Yeah.
And so we need them to be able to access the community to be able to conduct effective investigations.
Yeah.
And we're also launching next year a programme for supervisors,
Yeah.
which is about supervising those initial volume and priority investigations,
Yeah.
things like antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, the burglaries
Yeah.
that happen in those communities to help keep people safe. And it's always about incremental improvements,
Yeah.
both from a neighbourhood perspective and from an investigative perspective, to help reduce crime and make neighbourhoods safer.
Yeah.
And also to support vulnerable people and safeguard those that are most at risk from being exploited.
Yes, yeah, because again, that's a whole new and emerging piece, isn't it, really, as you were saying, about the changing nature of society and the crimes that are being committed.
Yeah.
So in terms of, again, my experience in this sort of world is when the government are bothered about something and when the sector is bothered about something, things happen, which is great. A new programme can be introduced. I was on the original JESIP team, so we pushed, to have the JESIP training done, and it went down really well, and everyone. But it's about how you embed that. So this is obviously an intervention coming in, which is applying to the officers that are in role now. What happens in the future? What about the new police officers that you'll recruit? Will this be part of their training?
It will. So at the moment, we've got to train everybody who's in role
Yes.
to get that standard and that level of consistency.
Yeah.
In the fullness of time, as we get everybody through the programme, those that are new to neighbourhood will go on this course before they are, if you like, let loose on the community.
Yeah.
And it will be treated as an initial training course, much like if you join traffic, you wouldn't walk into a traffic office, take your keys and hope for the best. You would go on a course to make sure you were operationally brilliant, ready to go, and you understood the rules of the game, if you like. So it will become an initial training course, and it will always be there, maintained and developed and added on as society changes, when there's changes in legislation. The police forces that have taken the licence to deliver this programme do so on the understanding that when things change in their own force, if they change computer systems, they change a method of recording something or a way of documenting something, that they will also maintain the training package so that it's always operationally current to the community, to the standards, and also to the skills that we feel our staff need.
Right. Okay. And in terms of that, then, if you've got obviously the services across the country training their officers, lessons are going to come up from that. Does the college have a role in gathering that learning then to act on or to consider?
Absolutely. There will always be a feedback loop coming back from the community that is policing in terms of what works well, what doesn't work so well, and that is fed back into the learning programs. It also helps us generate additional resources and tools that officers can use to help inform their day-to-day job.
Right.
And that would include things like we're developing an AI-generated search engine for policing that is dedicated to the guidance and advice that is available to policing, so that they can ask questions and get the right answers, and that supports their decision making and their critical thinking in terms of getting better outcomes. We're also looking at taking back some of those things that have worked really, really well, and generating a bank of case examples that frontline officers, whether they're neighbourhood officers, whether they're initial investigators, can tap into and learn from and generate their own effective investigations. I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
No, Joe, you make some excellent points there. I think that what you've managed to do there is outline the strategy. And the strategy that we have is you create a cohesive programme of learning for policing. And the cornerstone of that is the neighbourhood policing programme. And that fits and complements really well with the Professionalising investigation programme and the soon the Professionalising of public protection. So what you have is you have a really effective library, and it's a complicated landscape out there for a frontline officer, a frontline staff member. And our job is to create that complexity and give you a simple response, simple learning pathways that are on the front foot. And as you've heard there, some outstanding work that's been done in the neighbourhood world. The second part is to maximise use of technology. So here, the world is evolving, and AI is an effective method of us keeping the human in the loop, but simplifying a hugely complex landscape to give information to improve decision making when it's constantly, with different demands coming in left, right, and centre for those frontline officers and staff members. And then, so that's where the AI work comes in, and we've launched a pilot on that, and it's extremely powerful in terms of that anecdotal feedback we're getting. And then the third part is you create a good feedback loop from your system. So we need to know what's working, what's not working, and how, crucially, the knowledge from these different programs, the good parts that work, can be absorbed by the sensor and then cast out again. And one of the methods there is the investigations angle of the practice bank. So things that have worked in cases that work really, really well, that we can pass that through to the policing landscape so that officers, staff members follow those avenues as a matter of course, as opposed to the exception. So you can see a very clear strategy there from the College of Policing to continue to drive up standards across policing.
Absolutely. And then you talked about the fact that you've done a pilot programme and presumably people have started to be trained. What is the feedback like from those officers that have received the training or going through the training?
The feedback that we did gain was done via surveys and via interviews with pilot staff, and then now the national launch. And a lot of the feedback that we tend to get is, I wish I'd had this when I joined the neighbourhood. And even those with 27, 28, 29 years, almost ready to hang their uniform up, have come away and said, well, I've learned something today. So if we can teach someone with 29 years service something that they didn't know, imagine what we can teach those that are just starting their policing journey. And when you look at the neighbourhood establishment across the country, this programme is going to reach out to more than 20,000 frontline police officers, police staff, sergeants and inspectors, and really raise that standard, but also give them the network and the ability to reach out and say, via the practice bank, via their teams within forces, via sister forces and neighbouring forces, what did you do? What did you do and why did it work so well? Or what did you do and why didn't it work? So we can learn from each other instead of just always going down the same path. And that gives us the time to develop and improve and increase our skills and our ability to respond to what's emerging. Because we're not always doing what we did before, because it might not be relevant anymore.
No, absolutely. And I think there's something that chimes actually. In the last session, we were talking actually about people, the transition of people that have worked in blue light services or the military into other careers, and some of the things that people need to factor in and think about. And one of the things that came out of that was confidence. And I guess that's the other thing. The thing about neighbourhood policing, as you say, as society is changing, which is probably a daily evolution, new threats, new challenges are emerging, and those police officers on the ground are seeing that for the first time. But if they've got that baseline confidence of those skills that you're giving them, presumably it's equipping them really well to cope in the environment. That's the intent.
Building confidence and experience is a real challenge for those young in service. And if we can shortcut some of that through different tools and programmes, then we're helping them on their way. We're making them feel valued. We're giving them a career pathway and a professionalism that probably they would have taken a whole career to develop. So,
So you're sort of fast tracking that.
yeah,
That's brilliant.
absolutely.
Yeah, excellent.
I think the other thing it does is it builds confidence with the communities. I mean, I read a statistic somewhere from, might be slightly inaccurate, I'm not sure, but I think the point is, said that roughly speaking, about 40 years ago, about 70% of the area's population were born there and died there. We have a far more transient population now.
Yes.
So as a consequence, it's more difficult to follow people, to follow crime trends and things like that. Now, communities understand that. It's actually not the expectation that you will solve my problem or my crime. It's the expectation you will try your best. You will be the best trained. You will work as hard as you possibly can. You will be compassionate.
Yeah.
You will understand my concerns. The neighbourhood policing programme will solve problems, but it also empowers officers to address those concerns too.
Right.
Because we rely upon, police by consent model, we rely upon the communities we serve to come to us with that information. That trust and confidence is vital.
Yeah.
And that trust and confidence is often built by someone seeing you go the extra mile.
Yes.
And that's what I think it starts to strengthen.
Very good. Excellent. Well, I think that's been a really fascinating insight into this whole programme and the rationale for it and what's happening. I'd like to come out to the audience now and invite anyone to ask questions. So have we? Yes, lovely. We've got a gentleman at the front here.
Hi, good morning.
Bit closer.
I'm with the local authority. I'm an ex-police service member. Since austerity, as you can see, because of the police shortages and problems created, neighbourhood police had been put to zero back at the place because every force is trying to find it difficult to manpower-wise. Don't you think it's one of the things with neighbourhood policing, number one priority should be something like zero tolerance policy, whereby ASB is the main problems if you go into any community, any local authority area. And since austerity, it's rising and rising and rising, from e-bikes to vandalism, graffiti, yobs, uncontrollable. But at the moment, from what you've just told me, it's great in paper, but we need to tackle zero tolerance, because this is what my community want, where I'm from. And this is what they're finding it difficult, because the police service is always short of new recruiting officers. And officers used to come in before, used to go into neighbourhood policing as a 3 months pilot to see how neighbourhood policing work. But now, because of the shortage, they come in and they go straight to response. So by the time they leave response, these officers have done their 2 or 3 years, want to go into specialised more than coming into neighbourhood policing.
I think policing doesn't get anywhere when it complains about money. That's my honest personal view. I think a lot of different public sector organisations have got those financial constraints placed upon them. And I think our communities expect us to get on with the job. That's where I see policing at the moment. That doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. I just think that that's where we are as an organisation. And as a serving police officer, my job is to be politically neutral, as you can appreciate. So then, within that realm, I think then policing faces a challenge. It is never going to not prioritise those incoming calls, because they are threats to life. So you're always going to see officers attend to that, because quite appropriately there'll be a lot of inquiries if we didn't protect life, we didn't stop some of those serious things from happening, get there on time and so forth. But what I do think is really heartening when it comes to neighbourhood policing is, you've got that investment in a professionalised programme that's being taken extremely seriously by chiefs. I mean, Nicola, I can't remember how many pilot forces were involved. I think you lost count at one
11.
point. It was 11 at first, but I think you've had so much volunteering. I think that tells you all you need to know about the investment that's coming from police chiefs there. B, you are 100% right. As we discussed, the changing nature of neighbourhood policing is the traditional plus the new. So e-bikes are a fantastic observation, and they are causing havoc. But I was in a police force yesterday that sees 600 and odd bikes in about 6 months. It had gone from 50 in the year before, and I think that's because they are taking that threat so seriously. And then the cornerstone of this is our approach to policing, whether it comes to response, whether it comes to investigation, whether it comes to neighbourhood, whether it comes to public order. The foundation of it is that neighbourhood policing, because it's built into the consent model. You have to know your community. So I think that it will always have a very strong and stable home. I just think the pressures will be there around delivery. But I do think it's being taken very seriously. And I don't even want to talk about the neighbourhood guarantee there in terms of those numbers, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to answer your question about are police officers going into neighbourhood when they've done their time on response, it's our job to make that neighbourhood element of policing feel as specialised as firearms, as traffic, as being a dog handler, because it is absolutely a specialism. And we don't want people to move into neighbourhood just because they feel they can, or it's, I don't have to do night shift anymore. We want people in neighbourhood whose passion is, I want to solve problems, I want to relate and connect to my community. But the third part of that is I want to work with partners and get them held to account too, because it isn't always the police's responsibility to fix everything. And it's about that risk-based decision making and saying, as a community officer, I'm going to be visible. But what I'm not going to do is another agency's job, because then I'm away from being visible and I can't be out in my community because I'm doing somebody else's job when really they should be doing that. And that's where the neighbourhood policing guarantee comes in with the 5 pillars. And there is a pillar around antisocial behaviour and making safe town centres safer. There's a huge initiative running around safer town centres, which is enough for another session. You've got the professionalising of neighbourhood policing being in the second pillar, and that includes bringing in your volunteers. The government have committed to raise the number of special constables so that we are able to put people in the most visible of places as often and as frequently as we possibly can. But it's going to take us a bit of time. We've kind of got to that point, and now we've got to get back out of it. And hopefully, I would like to think, having seen the progress the pilot made with the 11 forces last year and the improvements they've had in antisocial behaviour. If I look at Northumbria, that's my home force, they've had an 87% reduction in antisocial behaviour caused by adults and nearly a 50% reduction in ASB caused by young people in the last 12 months. And I'd like to claim a little bit of that being down to the programme that's been designed and the fact that all those staff are now trained when previously they just turned up at neighbourhood and did the best they could.
In line with other departments and other specialisms which come with an accreditation, your PIP2, your firearms officers, I wonder, will the course that you're delivering give an accreditation to those officers that they can be then proud of what they've achieved and the learning that they've undertaken?
In short, in the fullness of time, yes. And to get it to that point would take a lot of work with external stakeholders, the likes of universities, Skills for Justice, agencies like that. And we wanted to get it out first. So it has been mapped, and it has been mapped against things that have been done before by other police forces, such as the Skills for Justice. And when you look at the levels of education, you look at level 1 being what you get when you leave secondary school, level 2 being your A levels, level 3 being that little bit higher, right up to level 5, which is your postgraduate level degrees. This is sitting at level 4. Skills for Justice, when it's assessed across curriculums by other organisations, is assessed at level 3. And actually we've said forces chose to do that, great, but actually we're going to raise the challenge and we're going to raise your standards and we're going to raise our expectations of your knowledge and experience that level higher. And once we've got everybody to that national standard, that's the time where we can draw a bit of breath and say, right, let's get this accredited. Who's interested?
And just to add to that, I think that is on a par with PIP.
Yeah.
And PIP 1 is level 4.
Yeah.
And so you're moving on from that common base, and everybody should be proud of what they've achieved at that level.
Hi there. I was going to ask, how does the college help to teach the social skills, which are obviously a fundamental part of neighbourhood policing, particularly in an online society with an inexperienced workforce who are very much brought up online and in terms of social media?
I think it's quite difficult, actually. When I went to training school 15 years ago, I did 17 weeks with a partner force, and every Friday at 1:45, we turned up and had our uniform inspected. And we were expected to know acts, sections, definitions. But we've moved on from there, and it's more about the ability to diffuse, to talk to people, to engage people. So actually, a lot of this programme has an evidence base, but is sat very much in how would you Not how does the statute tell you, what does the legislation say, what is the National Police Chief Council's guidance on it. Of course, that's absolutely relevant. But it's a discussion with a really experienced neighbourhood officer who stands at the front with a qualified trainer and says, you need to go to a community meeting, but actually there's been a load of disorder in that neighbourhood. How are you going to manage that community that are quite rightly really cross, want something done about it, and they want a timescale? How are you going to deliver that and stand up to the scrutiny that the public quite rightly expect? So there are a lot of what I think people would regard as social skills, soft skills, communication skills that are not necessarily given to our police officers when they make their initial entry into the organisation, because that is very much about knowing, stood there and then, split second, what are you going to do? What are you arresting them for, or what are you going to do for them? Whereas neighbourhood, yes, you've actually always going to have that element of immediate and initial response, but it's that take a step back, look at the landscape, and learn how to talk to people to get out of the community what we need to give them back what they want and what they've got a right to expect.
I think it's also worth adding, Nicola, that it's complemented by how, it's not just the what, it's how people learn. And 20 to 30 years ago, people learned a certain way. And we now know that people also learn with digital online, bite-sized chunks. And the program has been built that way in the manner that Nicola's described. Because we've got what, about a third of the force is 21st century cop and staff member with dates of birth that are post 2000, about a third of all forces, roughly, somewhere like that. So they learn in a very different way. And sadly, it takes an old person like me to recognise some of that. But the point is you have to adapt your learning methodologies, not to throw out what works, but to complement it with other methodologies. Because I think that's really important in terms of how that information is absorbed, because then it is used.
And there's age-old evidence, isn't there, about different people and learning styles. People learn differently, and soft skills are really difficult to teach. They have to be lived and experienced a bit, don't they?
They do. And when somebody comes out of their initial learning, they will have had exposure to communication skills, interviewing skills, trauma-informed communication skills. But it's actually when they get into the workplace and they're put together with a tutor or a mentor and they do their work-based assessment where they can test and check and try out those skills and develop those skills through doing, that they actually start to learn and embed that knowledge into what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, great.
Hi, you said that AI was going to support decision making. How are you going to mitigate the risk that it won't replace decision making, that new officers who are very online will actually not rely on AI and actually be able to make their own decisions?
It's a great question, and I think that's a question that, sorry, you can hopefully come through now. I think that's a fantastic question, and that is actually a perennial problem for AI. You've spotted it. And a lot of different emergency services are wrestling with that. I think the first thing you have to do is keep humans in the loop on key decisions. So it is not to replace humans in those key areas. Where I think AI is advantageous is where it speeds up something that it just needs to be done, but is not critical. So that's really important. The second thing is how you develop that AI. Now, if you can save time, the best way I think about the AI tool that we have developed is this. At the moment, we are sending staff members and officers into a library. That library isn't necessarily all registered, although a lot of it is. We don't know exactly where the books are, because the books could be on different pages. Sorry, the books could be on different shelves, but we're still sending them in there. So it takes time with all the many problems they face to go and find that answer. AI solutions should effectively take officers to the right library, to the right shelf, to the right book, to the right chapter, to the right line. So it speeds things up. But ultimately, the decision is still theirs. We're providing that information. So I think it's about the definition of how that AI is brought on. So effectively, are you asking AI to do something that a human would do or to speed something up? We are very much in this second category because policing is a social interaction. It's a human thing. And humans are fallible too. But if the machine says don't do, there has to be an escape. So everything we do and everything we produce, just like good national guidance, if the circumstances aren't right, it's for officers to justify that. So the AI does have that as well as a mechanism of warning to say, this is the guidance, but make sure it's applicable. So I think it's about how you launch that AI and make sure it's got those caveats in place, and make sure you're really clear with those red lines around exactly what it's supposed to affect and what it's not. And I can assure you, the AI we're looking at is to speed up and improve decision making, not to replace it, because this has to still be done by a human every single time.
Yeah.
Great question.
At the end of the day, every officer still has to apply the mnemonic plane. Is it proportionate? Is it lawful? Is it accountable? Is it necessary? And is it ethical? And they have to be able to evidence that, record that rationale, because they will be asked to explain their actions. So it cannot replace that critical thinking and decision making. As Jamie says, it's about shortcutting the access to information to make those decisions, not replace them.
And the guardrail that is used is human in the loop.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a really, we could lose probably another session on AI, I should imagine, because it's such a controversial topic. But that was a really great question to finish with. We are out of time now. So can I just ask you to thank our speakers for such a really informative conversation and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.